Okay, let me get those slides going here. There we go. Can y'all see those slides all right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yep. It's perfect.
Yes, no, maybe. Okay, perfect. Yay, it's always good when it shows up. Well, welcome everybody. It's nice to see you all. Some familiar faces, some new faces. It's all good. And as Becky said, I am going to be talking about communicating from the heart, how to speak so you get heard, and specifically how to speak so you get heard when you are networking. Now, some of you have attended my shorter version of this presentation, so you may recognize some of the information that I'm sharing here. However, today we're going to be doing a deeper dive into this topic, and we're going to specifically look at how communication skills help you become a more effective networker. I'm also going to share with you some new information and some specific strategies, and I'll give you the opportunity to walk through any challenges experience, and of course for questions. So I'm going to encourage you and invite you to think about your communication within the realm of networking. And if you have any challenges that you're currently facing or maybe faced in the past, or if you have a curiosity about, this person seemed really awkward with their communication, what did they do wrong? Whatever it may be, we're going to have time to walk through some of that. So please do bring some questions, some examples, some things that we can troubleshoot together. Now, let's start by looking at the 4 most common sources of communication breakdowns. And I'm going to highlight these right now, but we're going to come back and look at these again and exploring some strategies for resolving these. There we go. So the 4 most common causes of communication breakdowns, we're going to start with assumptions. Assumptions. Now, basically, assumptions.
Not seeing it move?
Yeah, no, yeah. Oh,
Are we
now
having?
I am. Yeah.
No, it moved. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
There may be a little bit of a lag. I was sharing with Becky earlier. My internet went out. So
Oh, no.
I am joining you via my mobile hotspot on my cell phone. So if something lags or the slides don't change quickly or something, that's probably why.
Right.
And, I apologize for that, and I'm soldiering through.
That not a problem. We'll be patient. Thanks for letting us know. Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely, absolutely. So if something is lagging, it's most likely not you. Unfortunately, it's me. So, okay, assumptions. So basically, you take for granted that they already know what you know. And assumptions are a really big communication killer and relationship killer because they basically are setting you up for absolutely unclear communication. And so we're going to go a little bit more detail into assumptions in a moment, but you all know what they say about assumptions. When you assume, you make an ass out of you and me, blah, blah. It's an old thing. However, it is true. How many times have you gotten really upset with someone or really disappointed with someone, or maybe even felt betrayed by someone, only to find out later down the road that you completely misinterpreted what they were thinking or saying or doing because you made an assumption about a comment that they made or a tone of voice or whatever it may have been. So assumptions are a really, really big problem for communication.
Shannon, do you think it happens more often now with remote work? Do you think that...
I think that it does because part of what's happening is with a lot of the remote work, we don't have the in-person cues and clues that we have. We only get this little bit of body language versus the entire picture. And it's harder, especially when you're on a multi-person screen like this, you don't see those micro expressions at all.
Yeah, yeah. Good stuff.
So it really can. It really can. And yep, absolutely. Thanks for asking that. Okay, let's talk a little bit about expectations. Now, with expectations, you believe that they must respond in a certain way, which is not only unfair to others, but it often doesn't match up to reality. And this can lead to feelings of disappointment and frustration and unhappiness. And in fact, I've heard expectations described as premeditated resentments. Ooh, isn't that a good one? And that's not only accurate, but more importantly, it's completely preventable. It's okay to have some kind of an expectation with someone, but it's not fair if it's not been clearly communicated or if you don't actually have a mutual agreement around it. So we're going to talk a little bit more about expectations and some of the difficulties that they cause and how you can not do that.
Oh, good.
The third communication breakdown source is unspoken needs. Unspoken needs. Don't make people be mind readers. Number one, they really suck at it usually. And also, it typically creates those dreaded assumptions and expectations. So really, if you're not in the habit of doing so, really encourage you to start stating your wants and your needs and your requests clearly and directly. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about what this looks like in the realm of networking or business. When we think of needs, we often think, oh, it's my personal needs. That has nothing to do with my business. Well, that's not true. And I have a classic example to share with you. The final communication breakdown source is emotional triggers. Emotional triggers. These are the events, perceptions, situations, and people that create a strong, immediate, knee-jerk reaction in us when we encounter them. And it's often a reaction that's out of proportion to the moment. So your buttons have been pushed. Maybe it's reopened an old wound, or it's tapped into a deep fear, or reminded you of a past trauma or upset. And when this happens in conversation, people get defensive or angry or too upset to speak clearly or even to speak at all. Now, we see a classic example of these emotional triggers when we look at road rage. I'm sure that you all have been driving down the road and seen somebody in front of you, or maybe even been the person where a car pulls in front and cuts them off. And all of a sudden, that person is screaming at the top of their lungs, red in the face, waving with one finger. And it's, the car didn't even hit them or anything. It just moved in front of them. But it's a really big reaction because it's not just about the car moving in front of them and cutting them off. It's about all the other times that they've been disrespected, that it's been unfair, that their turn has been taken, that they have felt unseen. Whatever those emotional triggers are, when we don't process our emotions and express our emotions in the moment when they first come up for us, they get stuffed and stuck and stored. And so anytime in the future from that, when we experience a similar emotion, it all daisy chains. So everything that got stuffed comes out, and it's this big over the top reaction. Now, any one of these communication breakdowns, assumptions, expectations, unspoken needs, or emotional triggers, any one of those will lead to misunderstandings and arguments and damaged relationships. So, what is the best way to be heard, you may be wondering? And it's fairly simple. Don't be a lousy listener. That is probably the biggest piece about communication, is being able to really fine-tune your listening skills. Now, listening is actually a learned skill. And it's like I said, it's a foundational major component of successful communication. So I want to share with you 6 different listening styles. And there are 2 categories of listening styles: limited and successful. So as I describe these, take note of which styles that you may be using, whether by default or consciously. So we're going to start with the limited side. And the first one on the limited side is strategic listening. Strategic listening. When we listen strategically, we're more focused on our side of the conversation and our own thoughts and our message than on the other person that we're speaking with. And this is often because we want to prove a point or convince someone that we're right. And as a result, most of the listening we do is for the purpose of looking for ways to counter or correct or control the speaker or the conversation or the situation. Now, in networking situations, we can often fall into strategic listening when we're focused on getting out our sales pitch, our elevator speech, making sure that they know what it is that we do.
Lynn and I
Next,
are
we
winking at each other for that one.
yeah, right.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, I'm sure you've seen that a lot over the
Yeah.
years.
And
I've
Alan
got
as
what
well.
you need today.
Exactly. And, honestly, a lot of times strategic listening will come up for people who aren't new to networking and they're nervous. And so they just blurt out all the information that they can think of about what they do and just don't even really relax enough to be able to effectively interact. Okay, next, there is adaptive listening. Now, when we listen adaptively, we're concerned about how others are viewing us, or maybe we're feeling uncomfortable or unsafe in that setting. And so we go on high alert and we're listening for cues and clues to figure out how to fit in or what's expected of us so that we can feel good or safe or loved. Now, this is a common strategy for codependence. Adaptive listening also often leads us to edit ourselves when we speak and causes us to avoid directly and clearly stating our opinions or our needs or our requests. Now, in networking, this can often lead to missed opportunities, such as not asking for referrals to potential power partners because we don't want to step outside of our comfort zone or we don't want to rock the boat or appear pushy. Now, that final listening side, that final listening style on the limited side is selective listening. Selective listening. This one is one of my favorites, especially when I'm talking with couples. Sometimes we're only half listening to what's going on around us. We train ourselves to block out the white noise so we don't get overwhelmed. And we can also carry this over to tune out anything unwanted or unpleasant, such as repeated requests to take out the garbage or a certain tone of voice. Now, selective listening rarely works to our advantage because it results in the other person feeling ignored and disrespected. And selective listening can frequently happen in networking situations, especially mixers, where it's easy to be distracted by the visual and the vocal activity that's going on around us. It's really hard to stay focused. Okay, let's move over to the successful categories of listening. And first we have active listening. Active listening. Now, active listening is simply the process of focusing completely on the other person until they indicate that they're complete with what they have to say. It's a wonderful way to encourage full expression without judgment or feedback, and basically just letting somebody get it off their chest. And from a networking perspective, this is easily done simply by showing an authentic interest in the speaker, letting them get out that full elevator speech before you dive in and try to get in your 2 cents. Next, we have reflective listening. Now, the goal of reflective listening is to improve communication and ensure that everybody is on the same page. And this requires echoing back some of the information and also asking clarifying questions. The listener may say things like, "What I heard you say was," or "let me make sure I understand," or "it sounds like what you need or are asking for is." A good go-to phrase for networking would be something like, "It sounds like a good referral to you could be someone who is that a good description?" You've let them know that you've heard what they've said, but you're also clarifying and making sure that you're getting it exactly correct. So you're going to be referring people to them that are going to be helpful for them. And finally, we have supportive listening. Now, when we listen supportively, we're taking on the role of coach or cheerleader or therapist, and we ask questions to deepen the conversation. And we are acting as a sounding board or a brainstorming partner. And we provide emotional comfort. So the listener may say things like, tell me more about that, or it's understandable that you feel that way, or how can I support you right now? This is often a really good space for us to be in, a really good listening style for us to employ when we are having a sales conversation with someone. Now, one way to incorporate supportive listening into your networking skills would be to ask something along the lines of what would be the best way to connect you with a prospective referral. Okay, so now that you know the different styles of listening, I'm going to encourage you to commit to becoming a good listener. Active listening and reflective listening are absolute essentials. Now, in a moment, I'm going to come back around to those 4 common communication breakdowns that we were talking about earlier and dig into specific strategies to avoid each of those communication breakdowns. But first, I'm going to share with you my 5 tips for compelling communication. Whew, say that 5 times fast. The first one, and this is really important, is to resolve not to take things personally. Resolve personally. This is often linked to emotional triggers, assumptions, and expectations when we take things personally. One of my favorite quotes was, I can't remember who said this, but you wouldn't spend so much time worrying about what other people think of you when you realized how infrequently they do. People are mostly too busy worrying about what you're thinking of them to be thinking about stuff about you for the most part, right? And again, taking things personally often means that we're assuming something. And it will really lead to a lot of communication breakdowns. Okay, now, tip number 2, start with the end in sight. Start with the end in sight. Now, before I talk about this part, I wanted to let you all know I do have kind of a summary notes page. You are more than welcome to take notes as we go through this. I love to see that. And if you're worried about missing some gem or something, don't worry. If you all put your name and email address, your contact info in the chat box at some point today, I will be happy to email you a copy of that.
Actually, the way I'd rather do it, rather than have everybody be doing that, it's disruptive.
Sure.
I'll be sending it out, so you could send it to me, and then I'll send it out when I send out the replay to everybody.
Perfect. Thank you, Becky.
Sure.
Thank you. So just let Becky know that you want that note summary, and I'll be more than happy.
I'll just send it out automatically to everybody. So yeah.
Oh, okay. Perfect. Perfect. All right. So start with the end in mind. What I mean by this is take a moment before your conversations, especially your really critical, important conversations, and ask yourself, what is the end result that I want from this conversation? Do you want to feel closer or more connected or better understood? Or do you want to make your point and be proven right? And remember, it's far better to be right than kind, because if you're right, what does that automatically make the other person?
Wrong.
Wrong. And nobody likes to feel made wrong. And often when somebody feels made wrong, they immediately stop listening, and communication kind of starts to fly out the window. I really recommend that you actually have a dress rehearsal for specifically challenging or really important conversations, whether it's a sales conversation you're going to be having with a prospective client, or a difficult conversation on a personal level. Take a moment and write down a list of questions or requests or other information that you might want to share with the other person, and then just run through that conversation in your head and imagine the other person's responses and visualize yourself successfully communicating with them. Doing this mental rehearsal will increase your confidence and also will improve the clarity of your message, because you'll be fine-tuning it. Okay, the next tip I have for you is, yes, at the beginning of the conversation, make a conscious choice to keep your heart, your mind, and your ears open. Listen with compassion. Take a moment and imagine yourself in the other person's shoes. And speak supportively. Kindness and sincere interest in the other person brings you closer together. And this is especially true in network events because we all want to do business with people that we like and know and respect. And if you are speaking with someone compassionately and supportively, they are going to respond because they're going to have that sense of trust in you and be reflecting that sense of respect back to you. Okay, next tip. Make your conversation a team effort. Make your conversation a team effort. I highly recommend that, especially when it's a really important conversation, that you, at the beginning, check to see if it's a good time to talk before you launch into the conversation. You don't know where they're at or what there might be in the middle of, especially if you're calling somebody on the phone, like a prospective referral partner or something like that. Who knows where they are at in the middle of their day and their thought process. So simply asking if this is a good time to talk, and check in frequently. So make sure that you're both on the same page. Use that reflective listening, and keep the conversation interactive and engaged. Nobody likes being talked at or being barraged with that wall of words. So make sure that you're bouncing the ball back and forth. This should be tennis. Okay. And finally, tip number 5, increase your self-awareness. Increase your self-awareness. If you don't notice that you have been emotionally triggered, you do not have a snowball's chance in heck of dialing yourself back and calming yourself down. You're in it. You're in the big trigger emotion, and rational thought and often compassion for the other person. All that flies out the window because you've gotten defensive. If you're not aware of your assumptions that you've made or expectations that you've already placed on someone but haven't communicated with them or haven't looked at them and gone, well, wait a minute, is this really fair? Then how can you possibly set yourself up for success, whether it's communication in networking or any other arena of your life? So I'm going to talk a little bit now about how to avoid those 4 most common sources of communication breakdowns. And this incorporates automatically some self-awareness. Before I do that, though, I want to give you my definition of being 100% you, because everything that I do really boils down to being self-aware. So my definition of being 100% you is you're 100% you when your thoughts, your feelings, and your actions are in complete alignment with your goals and dreams. I'll say that again. You're 100% you when your thoughts, your feelings, and your actions are in complete alignment with your goals and dreams. Now, obviously, you need to know what your goals and dreams are. You need to be aware of what your thoughts are that you're habitually thinking. You need to be aware of the feelings that are coming up and be able to identify them and be able to take care of your needs around them. And you need to be able to consciously choose proactive action rather than just kind of being bounced along by the powers that be or external events or what have you. And that really all boils down to self-awareness. And towards the end, I will talk very briefly about my favorite self-awareness tool, which is the Enneagram. It's just a really powerful tool to help you become more self-aware and to notice what those perception patterns are that you may have fallen into. Okay, but before that, let us get to some good stuff. I want to talk about assumptions. So again, an assumption is anything that's accepted as truth without evidence or really even thinking about it. And assumptions can also be learned behavior that comes from unquestioned beliefs that we've been programmed to accept as real because that's how it's always been done, or that's how we've seen it done in our culture or in our family or in our workplace. And assumptions really do not serve anybody. So I have 4 steps to avoid making assumptions here for you. And the first step is simply to learn to recognize when you've made an assumption. If you feel stuck or triggered, that's often one of your first clues that you've likely made an assumption about something or someone. The next piece is to ask clarifying questions, both of yourself and the other people involved. You can ask yourself, well, how do I really feel about this? How do I want to feel? And can I know that this is actually 100% true? What exactly are the facts here? And again, remember reflective listening, that's a really great resource here. Asking those clarifying questions. It sounds like you need this. Am I understanding you correctly? The other thing around assumptions is you want to make sure that you become an active listener when the other people are answering those clarifying questions that you've asked. If you're not fully focused on what the response is, you're going to miss something, and that will just lead to more miscommunication. And then finally, notice if you're triggered by the assumption or the experience. And if you are, take a deep breath and implement the trigger strategies that I'm going to share in just a moment. But it starts with noticing, ooh, I'm feeling a little bit out of control here. Ooh, I'm feeling a little bit more strongly about this, or a lot more strongly about this than really makes sense in the moment.
Now, does that, how do I put this? Like, because you're making an assumption, it's causing you to be triggered, or you're triggered, so that makes you make this, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
How do they
It's
relate?
actually, it can be both. It can be both.
Okay.
When we make an assumption about someone or something, it often will trigger us.
Okay.
Because we feel disappointed, we feel frustrated, we feel betrayed, we feel whatever. We make up this story in our head about what all of this means. And it's not necessarily based on reality. It's based on what we're assuming.
Okay.
What we think we see, how we're interpreting the situation.
So it's not a chicken or egg, it's a chicken and egg. It could be
And
both.
egg, exactly.
I like that,
Because
Steve.
oftentimes when we're triggered, that's often a flag saying that we've made an assumption, that we're not seeing things clearly, or we're not being open-minded to, what's really going on, or other possible interpretations of things.
And if your interpretation of thought is right, it's good to know that too. So you still have to go through this process to realize, okay, I'm mistaken, or yeah, I'm right. I don't want to work with this person.
Exactly. Because the healthy side of assumptions is our intuition, right? Sometimes we just have a gut feeling about something, right? And that's why it's so important to check it out. That's really what communication is all about, is constantly checking things out, asking the clarifying questions, finding out if there's something that the other person needs from you in order to understand better, or to feel heard or received by you.
I'm hungry for candy, but I don't really feel good about getting in that van.
Right, exactly. Exactly. Okay, let's look at expectations. So expectations, again, are the things that we imagine or predict are going to happen. And the problem is that we invest a lot of our emotions and our plans and our perceptions on those predictions. However, we do not control the world around us. And when those expectations fall short or just aren't met at all, we get really upset. So I want to share with you 4 steps to recover from unmet emotions. Oops, wait a minute. Where did I go? Yeah. Oh, here we go. 4 steps to recover from unmet expectations, excuse me. Okay, so step 1, honor your feelings, let yourself feel the feelings, take care of yourself around the feelings, express them however you need to, journal them, go yell in your car, whatever you need to do, but don't get stuck in them. Don't use your feelings as an excuse to blame somebody else. Feelings are really just flags that are letting us know what it is that we're not getting that we need. So we need to honor them, we need to feel them, and then we need to move through them and move on. And then the next step is to recognize that you cannot control everything. Sadly, we are not the masters of our own universe, really. And more importantly, let go of having to be right, because often that's what control is about. We're wanting or needing to prove that we're right, or be validated that we're right. So the next step is to review the setup of the expectation. What exactly was it that you did or thought or expected? And then determine what to do differently next time. So, for example, were you unclear with a request? Because then you had a certain expectation, but that wasn't clearly communicated. And so the other person had a different interpretation. They were doing the best they could to fulfill that request, but because they didn't understand it, because maybe you didn't express it clearly, things missed. Yeah. Or did you go all in and placed all of your hopes and dreams or whatever on this particular person or situation, and you didn't even have a plan B? That's an expectation that can prove deadly, especially in the business world. You always want to have a backup. And then finally, challenge yourself to look for the possibilities and the opportunities in the situation. I guarantee you they are there. And with assumptions and expectations in particular, we really are stuck in a lot of rigid thinking when we fall into those two traps. And this is one of the brilliant things about understanding your Enneagram, is it helps you to see what the most common perceptive traps are, or the thinking ruts that you often will get into for your particular Enneagram style. So you are just that much more aware and can recognize them sooner if you happen to stumble into one. And so letting go of that rigid mindset and starting to do some possibility thinking and say, okay, wait a minute, what can I salvage from this? Or what are the hidden opportunities here? Where's the silver lining? Can be really helpful in recovering from the disappointment of an unmet expectation. Okay, so now I want to talk about expressing needs. Remember, unspoken needs was one of those communication breakdowns. You are the one who's responsible for getting your needs met. You're responsible for getting your needs met. And remember that lack of clarity on your part will often lead to unfair expectations or assumptions or triggered emotions for both you and the other people involved. Now, I'm not saying when I say that you're responsible for getting your needs met, I'm not saying that you have to do everything by yourself, that you're an island, whatever. No, you have to express and make requests and know what it is that you need. So I have 4 steps here for getting your needs met. And the first one is simply to describe your observations. Explain what the situation looks like from your point of view. You're basically just saying, hey, this is what I'm seeing. This is how I'm interpreting the situation. And next, you want to name how the situation makes you feel. And you've probably heard this if you've been around any therapists or done any therapy, but the I statements are really key to avoid placing blame or making somebody feel blamed, and also keeping tensions down. Number 3, state what it is that you need. And then 4, make a specific request. Now, you might think that speaking about your needs doesn't necessarily apply to networking or business. Wrong. Let me give you an example here. What if you're planning to attend your first mixer in a new group and you're an introvert? And you could go and talk to the person who invited you, and you use those steps that I mentioned above and say something like, hey, I noticed that I'm not clear about the structure of the mixer or what's expected of me, and I'm feeling kind of nervous and unprepared. I need some more information, and can you give me an outline of the meeting agenda? That's a classic example of recognizing a need. I'm not feeling ready. I'm not feeling safe. I'm not feeling right. I'm feeling nervous about this, and going and actually getting some support, getting some help, getting some clarification, some support from someone. Okay. Moving on to the next one, handling emotional triggers. Oh my goodness, those emotional triggers. So knowing what your emotional triggers are and how to deal with them responsibly is a key component of good emotional health, of having happy relationships, of being successful in whatever you're doing. It's important. So here are some steps for you. Identify your triggers. First, you need to identify them. Keep a journal or carry a little notebook with you and just write down the situations that upset you during the day or during the week and what it was that you were feeling. Common triggers include things like feeling unheard or feeling judged or unsafe or unloved or feeling like you've been treated unfairly. Those are just the tip of the iceberg with things that could trigger us. Next, I really encourage yourself to give yourself some space to move through the feelings. So take a breath, take a break, take care of yourself, whatever it is that you need to do to feel the feels and then move on. And then once the dust settles, take some time to explore how your thoughts contributed to being triggered or made your emotions even stronger, right? So in that example of road rage that I gave earlier, that person is probably thinking things like, you know, what a jerk. I can't believe he treated me like that. You know, I'm having a crappy day already, and then that jerk comes in and does this, and it's just not fair, and life isn't fair, and my day is ruined, and right? All those thoughts keep making the problem worse. Yeah. And then finally, ask yourself, how could I have responded differently? How could I have responded differently? This is one of the biggest keys to beginning to remove some emotional triggers. How could you have responded differently? If you pre-plan a phrase of something to say or something that you can do to take care of yourself, oh gosh, if this ever comes up again and I get really angry like that, I'm going to excuse myself and go to the bathroom and take some deep breaths, whatever, right? Now you notice here the key word is respond, because when we are emotionally triggered, we are reacting. And when we're reacting, we're out of control. We're just completely in our emotions, and it causes a lot of damage. When we respond, we are consciously choosing how we're going to navigate the situation. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, excellent. So really briefly, and then we're going to get into the questions and answers and examples and all the good juicy stuff. One of the best resources that I am familiar with for identifying and releasing your emotional triggers and learning how to recognize and express your needs is the Self-Awareness Weekend. I'm just going to put up a little bit of information about that. The Self-Awareness Weekend, it's a 2.5-day personal growth intensive that really helps you to release your emotional baggage and your limiting beliefs. It's a really empowering and powerful and impactful experience. It's something that I participated in 25 years ago. It kind of set me on the path of where I am today. And I can't recommend it highly enough. If I were queen of the world, and I'm not saying I'm not, I would have absolutely everybody go to a Self-Awareness Weekend at some point in time, preferably when they're like, 16 or 20 or something, before they get so rigidly stuck in all of this stuff, which we can absolutely blow out of the water at the Self-Awareness Weekend, but it's a bit more, causes a bit more emotional baggage along the way. Anyway, I put the website there if anybody is curious or interested. We are having an introductory evening to that coming up here later on in the month. So if anybody is really curious, we have a safe venue for people to kind of check it out.
Very cool.
Okay, and then finally, I wanted to mention again the Enneagram. If anybody is interested or curious about what their Enneagram is, I have an Enneagram assessment process that I do. And I actually have a discount for people that are interested in doing that after they've heard me speak anywhere. I will send some information about that in the information that I send with the notes summary for today. I don't want to take a lot of time talking about it right now. I do give a couple of different presentations on the Enneagram. Keep an eye on the I Take the Lead calendar and come and join us. That's another way to learn more about it. So having said that, I want to open it up. I'm going to stop my screen share so I can see all the smiley faces. Or all the screensavers, whatever the case may be, and just open it up to see if anybody has any questions, or if anybody has a particular example that either is something that they're currently struggling with or they saw in the past and would like to know how to resolve that in the future.
I think it's important to be prepared because, like you say, if you can respond thoughtfully and not emotionally, you can handle it right there. I know too many people that they get upset and they go away from an encounter, and they that night they're thinking what they should have said, or 2 days later they're thinking what they should have said. And you shouldn't be dealing with something that happened 2 days ago for the next week. You know, if you respond then, if you think about it then it's gone. You don't. It doesn't weigh on you for the rest of your week.
Exactly. You've handled it. You've done what you could or what you needed to do, and you can let it go.
Lynn, that's a very man's perspective. Just saying.
Well, and I totally understand that.
Yeah, just fix it, get her done.
but realize a lot of men are afraid to speak up too because they're unsure of themselves and they have the same issues. You can be speaking in public and think, I don't see anybody responding. That doesn't mean anything. They're listening. They could be listening. And especially with these virtual workshops, you're speaking into a computer. You don't have that interaction that you do in person. So it's easy to think, I'm not making any headway here. I'm just speaking into a microphone. Is anybody even engaged? So, but I agree, Lisa, it can be much more difficult for women.
And really, when we are able to be responsive, we actually can cut out a lot of the suffering that happens. Right. Because it's when we don't take care of ourselves, when we don't express our needs, when we don't make requests, when we don't speak our truth, when we don't do those things, that we end up dragging it around with us until we finally are able to release it, to express it, to whatever we need to do.
I would also say the Enneagram presentation you do really pairs well with this, because you can think about how you're receiving information and how people around you get to recognize different types. And so then when somebody is a certain way, you can say, oh, that's this type of person. It's not personal. This is just the way they communicate. Everybody communicates differently. So once you dial all this in, you're not going to be as upset. It's like, oh, he's just like so-and-so, or she's just like so-and-so. I've been through this before. It's nothing personal. And the same thing with different cultures. You can be dealing with somebody from France, somebody from Russia, completely different interaction.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Very well said. Yeah. I noticed that somebody had put a question in chat around
that was
does astrology also help with working with clients like the Enneagram? That's a great question. Oh, I love that. So there are many, many different roads to greater self-awareness, and astrology is one of them. I really like the Enneagram because it really it has a lot of depth to it, similar to astrology. But it's not as, oh gosh, sometimes astrology just kind of makes my head spin, because there's just so many technical little details, and the times and the suns and the moons and the different houses and the this and the that and the other. It's really complex. And unless you have a really good guide to walk you through all of that, it's really hard to get a lot of juice from it on your own. Whereas with the Enneagram, once you know your Enneagram style, it's much more digestible and accessible to build upon that knowledge and to add to it and to incorporate it into your daily life. Now, I do have a caveat, and those of you who've heard me speak about the Enneagram have heard this. I do not recommend that anybody tries to interpret somebody else's Enneagram style, or to even interpret your own from an online assessment or from a book or whatever, because there are too many other factors that will color your responses. So, for example, there could have been a certain a trauma that happened to you that has caused you to echo a certain pattern, but it may not be your authentic Enneagram style. You're born with your Enneagram style. It's not something that you develop into. So I highly recommend that you have an Enneagram assessment to really get clear on it. Whether it's with me or not, I don't care. Just, don't run the risk of being misdiagnosed. That was something that I had to deal with when I first was exposed to the Enneagram. I would have sworn I was a 2, and I'm nowhere near a 2 on the Enneagram. So anyway, if you're curious about that, I'll be happy to talk to you about that later on. So, and then you had a follow-up question there too, Barbara. Let me pull that back up again. So tell me a little bit more about your question. Can you be a little bit more specific?
I was just thinking about resources for, understanding triggers and communication and all of that.
Yep, absolutely.
Like sort of expounding on what you're covering, because you're covering a lot of really good information, and to do some self-exploring with the information you're providing. And I would be interested in when you're offering an Enneagram class. I think that would be interesting to do.
Absolutely. That'd be fun to have you for that. Yeah. So yes, there are a lot of really great resources. We actually, when we hold the self-awareness weekend, and I've been co-facilitating the self-awareness weekend for the last 14 years. And we have a book list that we offer people of some of our most highly recommended resources. If you have a specific curiosity, I would be more than happy to share a couple of recommendations for you. And here's the challenge that we've seen time and time again with people who attend the self-awareness weekend. They've tried the self-help books, they've tried all this other stuff, and they're still struggling. They're not getting the results that they want. They're not able to process it. And here's the challenge, is that all of that stuff, all the self-help books that have so much really good information and resources, have to come through that perceptive filter of your ego mind. And again,
Right.
depending upon your Enneagram, depending upon whatever perceptive contaminations you might have. When I first started doing this work, I was so self-judgmental because I ate, breathed, and drank that from my father. He was very judgmental. And so I had just internalized that and turned it on myself. And so none of those self-help books really could make a dent in the pain and the challenges I was facing, because it had to make it through the ego mind. Whereas with the self-awareness weekend, or with hypnotherapy or other modalities that are out there, it works from the inside out. So you're going straight to the core of the issue. And then once you've kind of cleared all of that baggage and removed some of those limiting beliefs, you can go back and pull all the books off your bookshelf. Those wonderful self-help books will actually be deepening your understanding and giving you many more gifts than you could possibly have found in them from before. Yeah.
Thank
Good
you.
question, Barbara. Thank you.
Mhm.
Has anybody had any challenges with communication with their spouses or?
Anybody want to toss out a hypothetical?
No, we know when to shut up.
Well, you're a smart man, Lynn. And you do know. Yeah. That's funny. Well, I know I've shared with Shannon that I was married before. And I, what was it? Well, my listening skills were, I would listen always with the objective of being able to get him to see my point of view always.
Right. Right.
Right.
You're always looking to close the sale no matter what.
I know, exactly.
I'm gonna make this deal right now.
Right.
Because he was always wrong, you know.
It's nice to let
So
your
if
partner
no-
be right at least 5% of the time. At least, that's a bare minimum.
Exactly. Well, if nobody has any more questions, I want to offer you one little bonus tip.
Sure.
So how many of you are familiar with the term pacing within the realm of communication? Anybody? Lynn is a bit? Yeah.
A
the
little bit,
audience?
yeah.
Excellent. A little bit? Okay, so when you are pacing, you are first meeting someone where they are before you try to lead them somewhere else. So one of the ways that you can look at it is if you're focusing on serving someone rather than selling them. If you're dealing with someone who's really upset, you be with them in the really upset and you kind of match their energy a bit. You know, oh man, I can see how much that must piss you off. That's completely understandable that you feel that way. And you resonate with them on that level before you diffuse the situation. They need to feel heard. They need to feel validated. They need to feel seen. And then you can start to nudge them in another direction. So I always recommend that if you are wanting to really connect with somebody, that the pattern goes something like pace, 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 lead. So you really want to be 75% more connecting and pacing and matching them where they are, putting yourself in their skin, those kinds of things, before you start to try to lead them in whatever direction you want the conversation to go, or you want the, you know, the sales call to go, or whatever. So that's just a little extra bonus round for y'all.
Oh, very cool. Thank you. So you'll send me over information about the self-awareness weekend. About the because you're gonna have an evening that they'll get a preview.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I'll send over the note summary. I'll send over a little paragraph about the self-awareness weekend and a link for the website as well as the intro night. I think it's October 25th is our next intro night, where we kind of give people a taste of what the weekend is like and those kinds of things.
Sure.
And then, the Enneagram. I'll also send over the information about the Enneagram assessment and the discount that's available to y'all if you decide that you would like to dance that dance with me.
Very good. Very good.
Yeah.
Well, good. Well, thank you, everybody. Does anybody have any kudos that they want to share, or anything that they learned?
Well, good information, very good information. And I would just throw out that if you've had sales or management jobs with medium to larger size corporations, you've had a chance to go through different trainings and things that are similar. And the important part to remember is, especially when you're trying to look like an Enneagram or any type of personality traits, you want to have a facilitator to guide you through versus doing it yourself. And the trainings are the same way. If you try to do it all yourself, you can make some headway, but you can end up chasing rabbits down holes left and right, following whatever path is there. There's a reason why corporations typically pay somebody to come in from the outside and do these types of trainings. Is you get a lot more effective training and get more bang for your buck. So, and that's essentially what Shannon's doing for small businesses, is offering that level of training.
Well said, Lynn.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you, Lynn.
Thank
you. Alan, you unmuted.
Oh, I was just going to say, I got some really good information, took lots of good notes and stuff. So I'll be looking forward to the overview, the note sheet that you said you would be sending out too. So I'm looking forward to that. But yeah, otherwise, great information. This has been kind of eye-opening for me too. So good stuff. Thank you very much. Yeah.
You're so welcome. You're so welcome.
And Lisa, you unmuted.
I just want to say really just great information. And the thing is that if unless we are communication professionals, we might have heard this or pieces of this in the past, and it is always a wonderful reminder. So thank you very much. It's good to see you again.
Good to
I
see you as well,
know, I
Lisa.
know.
Thank you.
Yeah. So good. Well, thanks everybody for being here. And I will be doing a replay or sharing the replay with all of Shannon's information. So anything you missed or whatever, you'll get to hear. Plus, we had several who couldn't be on the webinar today. So I want to make sure they all get the information as well. So
Thanks, Becky and Shannon.
thanks, Steve. Glad you were here. And thanks so much,
Absolutely.
Shannon. I appreciate you.
Absolutely, my pleasure. It was fun. I enjoyed. It's always interesting to hear the different questions and the different perspectives that people bring whenever I do any presentations. So thank you for being here. I appreciate you choosing to spend some time with us.
I know. You guys all make it much more fun. So
Always time well spent.
exactly. Thank you.
Awesome.
Well,
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Well,
Bye, everyone.